Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show on the 30th of October 2019. And we've got a very busy night ahead with this developing storm that is going to be heading for the Great Lakes. We are going to see a serious threat for severe weather on Thursday. There's a risk tonight, but there's a serious enhanced risk of severe weather in the mid-Atlantic states, extending up into Pennsylvania, with marginal risk going all the way up the Hudson Valley. You don't really see that too often this time of year. In the past, I could think of a few times where it's happened in the last 10 or 15 years where we've had these intense systems at the end of October and through the month of November that produce severe weather. But this one might be near the top as far as the extent of severe weather that's being forecast by SPC. And we kind of had this feeling a couple of days ago looking at everything that was going on with this solid cold front coming through and a really, really strong tropical flow that is coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. We've had basically 3 systems in a row like this. They have rhymed to a large extent. So we're going to take a look at all of that. The Hurricane Center had 17 as their top number for tropical named storms this year, and guess what? They got their 17th today, and that's with Rebecca out in the Atlantic, although I think you can call some serious questions over the last 3 as to whether they should have been made tropical systems or not. I don't make those decisions. Clearly, the Hurricane Center has their set of criteria to name these systems, be it tropical or subtropical or not at all. Olga was a tropical storm for all of about 5 hours, but nonetheless, we'll take a look at that. It really has no impact on our weather at all. Just got another name out of the way. Let me just very quickly let all of you know. So just make sure you have the meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app, okay, which you can go on Google Play or on the App Store and just search meteorologist Joe Chaffee and download it for free. And also download Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman, also for free. Starting on November 16th, when I'm done with my day-to-day TV stuff and I'll be going full-time online. Not that I'm not full-time now, but at least I won't be spending a large chunk of my day on the road, and I'll have a lot more flexibility when it comes to posting at certain times of the day. A lot of times I'm doing other things and stuff gets away from me, but that won't be a problem. But what I'm getting at is with respect to Facebook, where a lot of my audience resides, I once again have been put into the doghouse, not in a very limited way, but it just kind of goes back to the point that I've been making when this has happened before, that I'm gradually going to be taking a lot of my weather stuff off the Facebook platform. The Facebook platform will be there. There will be some weather information posted there, but the bottom line is, if you want to stay on top of things, you need to either be on both those weather apps, or certainly my weather app, but get the Angry Ben weather app as well. Again, both are for free. And there will be, and there already is, extensive extra coverage on the Patreon platform. Well, guess what? There's going to be even more coverage geared toward the subscription platform, which is my Patreon platform, and that's just $2 a month. And bear in mind that $2 a month really goes a long way in supporting the 2 apps, the videos that I do, the websites, and everything else. So thank you for those of you who were part of the Patreon platform, and a number of you that are on the live stream on a nightly basis are there every day. And we'll talk more about this in the coming days. So let's get started with what's going on in the weather world. And by the way, the Joe and Joe show will obviously, after the middle of November, is going to be a little bit more difficult to do, but I am going to find a way to get it done. All right. A lot of you enjoy when Joe is on. I enjoy it when he is here. We took the show off of Facebook because of everything that's been going on that particular platform. I just didn't want to have to deal with it. So anyway, we're going to try to have him on. If I can get him on once a week or get him to Skype in, I'll consider that a win. So let's go first off to what's up at the moment, because we have a number of advisories up. There's a lot of winter weather advisories up from northeast Texas going all the way up into northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin and parts of northwestern Michigan. Chicago might see their first snows out of this system. We've got a number of freeze watches and warnings that are up in parts of Texas, frost advisories all over the place in the middle Mississippi and parts of the Tennessee Valley, because that's where your trough is, and it's more of a ridge in the east pushing up that warm tropical air. We've got flash flood watches up in North Georgia, western North Carolina. I'm actually a little surprised that they haven't put up more flood watches up further north, particularly for eastern and central Pennsylvania and points southward, because you're going to probably catch the bulk of this cold front coming through with some heavy rains. Maybe they'll catch up and do it later on tonight and tomorrow. We already have various high wind advisories and high wind watches up for areas around upstate New York and in New England. Now, there are a lot of missing spots here, and that's because these advisories are really up more for tomorrow night. So some offices have done the preemptive thing and they've put it up now. They've issued the advisory now, even though it doesn't go into effect until tomorrow evening and tomorrow night. Other offices are going to wait till tomorrow to do it, and that's when you'll see the rest of the area fill in. And out in California, we still have a big problem with wind. And it's a cold wind, by the way, because it's coming down the backside of that trough. So a number of red flag warnings, high wind watches and warnings, some freeze warnings and freeze watches in effect with the very dry conditions there. Of course, the wildfire risk continues to remain rather high. Now, the WPC rainfall for the next 7 days, and obviously this is front heavy because all this storm, after this storm pulls out, it's going to calm down for a bit. So most of what the precip that you're seeing here is from the system that is currently in the east. And you can see what I was talking about with respect to having flood watches up further north, because WPC has got some 3-inch plus rains being indicated for parts of the eastern half of Pennsylvania, and even nudging into northwest New Jersey and on up into the Catskills and throughout upstate New York. So again, it might be that they'll wait for the morning, but still substantial rains from all of this on top of what has already fallen has gone a long way to benefit the very dry conditions that have been lingering in the southern part of the United States and in the southeast, although the rain along the coastal areas of North and South Carolina and just inland by about 100 or 150 miles, a lot less. We're talking about basically less than a half an inch of rain falling out of this particular system. But you take what you can get. It's bone dry out in the west and in the southwest and through much of Texas, except for the eastern areas. And also seeing a little bit of precip up in the northern plains, and some of that along the way will be in the form of snow. And of course, you've got some Great Lakes moisture as well, that we're going to have some of that falling in the form of snow. Okay, so let's get started with where we are and where we're going at the moment. We're going to start off tonight with the surface map. Because it's a pretty interesting setup that we have here on the surface map. And there is your frontal boundary down through the Gulf states. You've got a lead wave that is now moving into Tennessee, southwest of Nashville. And notice on the other side, I don't know if you can see these numbers because they may not be large enough, but I have the other map that we can look at, the interactive map from the Weather Service, so we can look at temperatures. But just trust me on the fact that at least as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, we've got temperatures back in Texas are in the 40s, 30s, and even the 20s. And you head up into Colorado, and up through Wyoming, and you're looking at temperatures in the teens. So this is very, very cold air for this time of year that's coming down on the backside, and this is all pushing ahead of the warm tropical air that is coming up the eastern seaboard, and the dew points in the southeast, in southern Alabama, Georgia, and into Florida. You've got dew points there that are in the 70s, so this is a pretty solid push of warm tropical air. And even on the other side of this front, the onshore flow is nothing special here. It's actually been weakening as we've gone through the day today. It's not like we have some big high to the north with a lot of northeast isobars pushing in. It's a very, very weak, and I would call it a challenged onshore flow. So it's not going to take too much to disrupt it. There's warm tropical air coming up from the south with showery rains, with this lead wave that is coming out. So gradually we're going to get into a warm sector of some sort. Some areas might hold on a bit, maybe along the very immediate coast, might hold on to that marine layer, but I think it is going to be successfully dislodged, and we're going to see temperatures tomorrow push up into the 70s ahead of the developing low and the cold front. This cold front's a bit of a powerhouse. Now, we should have the plot coming up here, if it will. I don't know why it disappeared. This happens sometimes. I'm not sure why it does this. See if I move it over. Sometimes that gets it going. Nope, I lost the data. Isn't that special? Let me see if I take a plot off and put it back on. Will that set it off? Nope, that didn't work. Okay, so this map for some reason is not working, so we'll move on. And we'll go to the water vapor imagery, because this really kind of stands out. We're looking at the high level moisture, and you certainly can see the features that are in play here. We drew this yesterday, okay? Drew this yesterday when Joe was here, and if you notice, there hasn't really been that much eastward progression yet. The upper trough is still out in the west. It is beginning to swing to the east, and we do have a bit of a piece here that is running up northeastward. You can just pick it out right about here where I drew in those lines. Let me clean it up. But right in here, there's a lead short wave, and then you have the base of the trough is back out through here. That is coming out in short order. But the flow of moisture coming out from the Caribbean, the high-level flow, is pushing all the way up the eastern seaboard. So you're definitely setting up here for a strong event. And, of course, on the other side with that trough, you've got this cold air that is coming down through the Rockies and pushing itself all the way in through Texas. So the upper air on the water vapor imagery is actually quite impressive. I'm going to switch just to the mid levels, because we could see at least some of the mid-level dry air that's around, and there is some, but still pretty impressive here. Flow of moisture at mid levels coming up across Baja California and Texas, and then you got this little extra feed that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and then it's all kind of joining together for this party that's going to happen with respect to this storm system moving up. Now, the rains tonight are the first area here. That's with the lead shortwave. So we have showers and some heavier downpours. It's actually it looks like more of a solid area of rain here that's coming up. And it's pretty extensive, down from the Delmarva Peninsula through Maryland and into western Pennsylvania, covering all of Ohio, down back through Virginia and North Carolina. Notice a little bit less as you get closer to the coastal plain, and then running southwest into northern Georgia. Where the frontal boundary is, you're getting some showers and storms now developing in northwest Mississippi down into northeastern Louisiana. So all of this is going to play through. This first area, this first short wave is going to bring showery rains overnight. So all of this is going to play through the northeast for overnight and tomorrow morning. There might be a bit of a break after that. And then, of course, you've got the second area here. And this is the powerhouse shortwave that is going to generate a low, and that low is going to intensify once it reaches up into the Great Lakes. And we've got a very, very sharp looking cold front that's going to come through the east tomorrow evening and tomorrow night, probably actually more toward the early morning hours as far as the front moving offshore. So let's look at SPC, and this is what they did this afternoon. They really went aggressive with enhanced risk. You don't see this at the end of October, beginning of November, but you've got enhanced risk into south central Pennsylvania, into Maryland, Virginia, and parts of North Carolina. If you want to leave the enhanced risk out for a moment, even just that area of slight risk is fairly extensive to the New Jersey-Pennsylvania line, back westward to about Altoona, and then southwest from there through the eastern half of West Virginia, western North Carolina, and then swings around across northern South Carolina. So this is a pretty impressive area of severe weather that SPC is indicating. On their discussion, which I didn't get a chance to read, but I'm going to just scan it through here real quick. Portions of Pennsylvania, New York, southward to the zone of showers and storms should be ongoing at the start of the period from mid-Ohio Valley to mid-South region, southwest to the Gulf, in the vicinity of advancing cold front, secondary area of showers and embedded lightning, shifting quickly northeastward to the Carolinas and Virginia. Only minimal severe risk, mainly in the form of gusty winds or a brief tornado, is apparent at this time within either of these areas of convection. And then they talk about that's the early shot. And so here, as far as the system for tomorrow night, very strong flow aloft, aid in convective organization, upscale evolution toward a semi-continuous band of storms expected. They were impressed. By late afternoon, early evening, the storms will likely have become fairly well organized, crossing the south central and southeastern Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas, with the attendant risk for strong, damaging wind gusts. And I guess that's where, with the what the main emphasis is going to be. Low-level wind profiles will become supportive of supercells during the afternoon across the prefrontal warm sector. So it'll be important to see where that warm sector sets up. And I think that would be south of my zone, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. While suggestive of some tornado potential, prefrontal warm sector storms are largely not anticipated. So anything north of the warm front, they're not worried too much about. So they seem to be pretty impressed and fairly aggressive with tomorrow. I can't really argue with it, considering what's going on and what we're looking at on the satellite loops and on the models. And here's our severe weather risk. I'm kind of going at it backwards. So this is what the risk area is for tonight, which is this marginal risk for Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, most of Louisiana, western Georgia into eastern Tennessee, and a small area there in southeastern Kentucky, with generals thunderstorms kind of fingering their way up into Pennsylvania. You can see where they have their general line drawn, the edge of it. So that's kind of where they're thinking the marine layer is going to hang on for a bit longer. I really do believe that this is going to get out of the way. The snowfall potential from the Weather Service for tonight and tomorrow with this, showing some 3 to 5 inch amounts in parts of northwestern Illinois, southeastern Iowa. Weather Service in Chicago giving them 2 and Milwaukee 4, and it looks like Green Bay on the northern edge of there with about 1 inch, and some 1 to 3 inches with a few isolated heavier amounts up in northern Michigan. This is not too shabby for the end of October to see a system like this coming out. So for me, I'm kind of impressed by all of this. So let's look at the GFS model. The new one is out, at least to carry us through the storm system. So here's your first area of showers that's obvious on the radar. Let me just refresh your memory here. I'll get the so there are your showers tonight, and you can see it on the wider view that they extend how they shape up. And we're close to getting closer to the 8 o'clock hour. So the GFS has rain It looks like the actual radar might be a little bit faster, but you see the lead area here. Perhaps the GFS not quite handling the second zone of storms that's already fired up in northwest Mississippi and western Tennessee, because by tonight they really don't have much there and into Alabama, so it's hard to, it's not going to just disappear in the next hour and 40 minutes. But it looks like the the southern edge, they're probably a little bit on the slow side. And that first area plays through tonight into tomorrow morning and moves out. Now, this is the warm front basically moving northward. And the isobars go southwest, and they get pretty bunched up here. So look for the south wind to really pick up. That's why I think this marine layer is going to get blown out of the way to a large extent, except maybe right along the immediate coast with the south wind off the water. Water temperatures are obviously well off their peaks now. So that might weaken some of these storms tomorrow night as they move eastward. But the main low really starts to rev up tomorrow with the low there in western Ohio. And then you start to see the showers and storms with this coming in to the northeast. And by tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, the GFS, the NAM, the European, they all have a really vigorous line of storms here that develops, running from upstate New York, but the main part of that line, the heaviest part of that line, from Pennsylvania down into Virginia and into North Carolina. Now, one of the things that will probably happen is that the line will reach its peak. Once it gets into western New Jersey, it still actually holds together a fairly solid line of storms even into Long Island, and this is at 2 a.m. The other thing I would like to point out that I think is really important, and Joe Rayo mentioned this last night, and it's definitely worth mentioning again. So here's our cold front, and I may have it a little just a shade further to the west, but if you notice the isobars are almost V-shape here. This is a very, very sharp front, and I think you're likely to see some pretty hefty winds with this when the front goes by. Regardless of whether these storms hold together or not, I think you are looking at a very strong wind shift episode that's going to be occurring, with winds going from the south-southwest to the north-northwest. And if we pull up the 10-meter wind on the GFS, showing gales along the coast and into Long Island and southern New England and southeastern New England and back down through Delaware and Chesapeake Bay. The wind isobars look to be southerly. I'm not sure with regards that might cause some coastal flooding in Chesapeake and Delaware Bay, and also for the south shore of Long Island, something to look at as far as high tide is concerned. But you can see by 2 a.m., the GFS does get pretty aggressive with some of these winds offshore. So every bit of gales along the coast, and even 20 to 30 in the darker greens, these are sustained winds. So the gusts could easily be 50% above that, or even double, possibly, in some places, when that V-shaped, very sharp cold front moves on through. And also some rather strong winds, although the model seems to have backed off a little bit from its ferocity over Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. They were showing 50 knots plus. They're not quite there this time around, but 40 to 50 over Lake Ontario when we get to later Thursday night into Friday morning. Of course, you can see the very tight pressure gradient with that 988 low that is up in Canada there along the St. Lawrence River. So the worst of it will be tomorrow night when this area moves through. And when we look at the area of rain with it, again, no surprise WPC is doing what it's doing from the standpoint of some 2 to 3 inch plus rainfalls. That's a very, very solid looking area here. With all this tropical moisture, it's hard to fight. And of course, on the backside, you see the comma-shaped swirl producing snow. Some of it's going to be intensity driven because it's not exactly the coldest air that you could see in a situation like this. If we were a month down the road, you probably would see a more extensive area of snow on the backside. But there should be something. And then it moves on up toward the St. Lawrence Valley, as we said, for Friday. The winds will start to relax a little bit as we go through the day, but it'll still be pretty breezy. And then that takes us into the weekend, which is going to be on the dry side. We do have a weak secondary front that is moving southeastward out of Canada on Friday night, Saturday. But this system basically robs the atmosphere of everything, so there's not going to be a whole lot for it to work on. There's also a stalled out frontal boundary from Florida northeast out into the open waters of the Atlantic, and we'll probably get a little wave to develop there, but that stays suppressed south and east because the upper trough is coming through, but it's going to be very broad. So everything's going to get pushed out. The weekend looks to be dry. It looks to be on the chilly side, and that chilly air is probably going to make it down through certainly the mid-Atlantic states, and you've got a push down even into the southeast. So this is a pretty decent shot of chilly air for the beginning of the month of November, with below average temperatures at least into Monday. And then we've got another front that's coming for Tuesday night and Wednesday with another push of chilly air for the second half of the week. It's a rather, to me, when I looked at the whole overall pattern here going forward, we mentioned yesterday about it relaxing, and I think that's probably the best way to describe it. It doesn't mean that we won't have weather systems to deal with, but in terms of having another major storm happening on the heels of this one, that will not be the case. You see how the upper low just kind of lifts up to the northeast into southeastern Canada. You get the trough that drops in for Saturday. Again, it's very broad. It's not sharpening up as it moves towards the east coast. It's actually broadening out. So it almost looks like a giant bowl in the east. And that brings down cool air or chilly air from Canada. You got a nice flow there that sets up from northern Canada into the plains and Great Lakes, and that cold air spreads out into the east. Trough at 160. Okay, you got this upper low that's sitting. I drew the trough out there a little bit too far to the north, so ignore this top part of it because you actually have a ridge, an upper high with ridging along the coast of Alaska going northwestward. But you've got an upper low that with a trough down to Hawaii at 160, so that favors a trough in the east, and you've got another ridge that runs up toward Greenland at about 50. The overall pattern is progressive. Weather systems are moving along, so one trough lifts out, next one tries to drop in, and on it goes. So we don't have really a whole lot of amplitude here. It's just this sort of very basic, broad, I guess kind of boring from the standpoint of storms through at least next week, which is as far out as we have on this particular GFS. So I'll have to go back one run, and we can take a look at where it goes from here. And it still kind of tries to hold the trough in the east. It keeps dropping short waves in that northwest flow into the northeastern part of the U.S. It's nice to see if you're a winter weather lover. I think the last thing you want to see is any kind of fire hose jet across the Pacific, and you really don't have that. If we take a look at the Pacific side, you're seeing pretty robust weather systems with troughs and ridges in between. So it's not this flat, almost ruler-like flow of a screaming jet going across. Instead, you've got systems, short waves with amplitude just kind of moving along, and a trough that looks like it wants to be at least in the eastern half of the United States. At the end of the period, the flow kind of goes a little more westerly, but it's still somewhat on the chilly side. So it'll probably lead to a few different things happening with the weather fronts, and we'll look at the surface map, what it's doing here. But here you go. So here's our system for tomorrow, of course, and that goes out. And looks like, at least by the time we get to Saturday morning, that except for a little bit of snow up in the northern lakes and maybe a couple of scattered showers in parts of Florida, it's pretty quiet from one coast to the other. Here comes your little diver with another cold front for Tuesday and Wednesday. That goes by well to the north, so it's a minor push here. Some snows dropping down into Montana and Wyoming and into the northern plains, because it looks like it may want to set up some kind of frontal boundary as we go out to days 8 and 9 down in the Gulf states. You got that push, that finger pushing up into the Ohio Valley, and looks like a bit of snow there for parts of Iowa and the lower lakes, assuming that it verifies. But we seem to be getting this parade of highs coming down, which is kind of interesting. You've got this first one from the Rockies that goes to the East Coast, the second one that comes in for later next week. Nice looking high there that drops down with some colder air. And then another one behind it that's even colder. That's actually pretty cold air with the thicknesses down in the low 500s. Just want to take a look. Let's look at the anomalies here. So that's at day 8 or 9. But going through the weekend, of course, we have tomorrow some leftover air very early Friday morning, and then it's pretty much below normal everywhere east. Actually, the whole country, for the most part, is below average as far as temperatures, except for a few areas in Florida, and I guess in some parts of California there, you're seeing above normal temperatures in what looks like the mountains, but everywhere else it's below average. Not often you see it below average from coast to coast, and then it just kind of concentrates a bit more in the east. You start to see the next push of cool air, and then that more sizable push that comes in toward the latter, again, toward day 8, day 9, with respect to the new GFS. So, look, the bottom line is Halloween's going to be, in the East anyway, is going to be a pretty nasty day. It just is, with all that's going on with this storm. I'll just pull up the U.S. satellite loop, and then I'm going to just join you guys on the chat board here. So hang on one second. And there you go. So the actual satellite tonight, just look at that. That's just that's a ton of moisture that we're dealing with, and that's all lifting up to the northeast, and that rain is going to be sizable. Again, a reminder with WPC and what they're doing here. Some fairly sizable rains running up the Appalachians and in through Pennsylvania to about northwest New Jersey, through the Hudson Valley and up into the Adirondacks, northeast up into Maine. It's been raining a lot in northern New England, so you guys are going to get even more of it. So 6:30 Eastern time right now, and thanks everybody for being here. I pushed the live stream up a little early tonight because I need to get something to eat. I need dinner, so that's where my thoughts are lying at the moment, on my empty stomach. Izzy D, V-shaped sounds good in troughs for winter storms, but of course it has to be picture perfect. Possessions, otherwise perfect positions. Otherwise, Lakewood gets rain. I know you're on the coast. That's what happens. You gotta have it. You gotta have it set up. But I wouldn't say perfect, but you got to have all your ducks in a row with all of this. Steve Lapointe, yeah, Sunday's the marathon, and it should be a pretty decent day. And runners like it cool, so that they'll definitely have. With respect to wind, that's the other issue for Sunday. Let's see. Hang on. So for Sunday, it actually may. Well, I mean, it's not going to be flat. It won't be howling, but it might be northwest at about 10 to maybe 15 miles an hour. With the, you run through Manhattan through those wind tunnels over there. You almost always seem to find a way to get gusts heading up into the high 20s. Scott Briller had a tooth pulled today. Poor Scott, in recovery. I had actually 4 wisdom teeth that were taken out when I was young, and they had to blast them because they were sideways. And they literally had to go in there with a hammer and chisel and just kind of chop them up into pieces, and then they sucked all the pieces out with a vacuum. And I had, believe it or not, I think I was maybe 21, 22 at the time. I had no pain after the the heavy duty anesthesia that they did. Although I was awake for it all, I had no pain afterward. Just a couple of Tylenol, and that was it. Can I get a hint at looking at the upper air trough? It may lead to storm at the surface as opposed to dry, cold air masses, especially heading into winter. How can you get a hint by looking at the upper air trough if it may lead to a storm or if it's going to be dry? Okay, so one of the things you want to look at, anytime you look at a weather system, you want to look at where it's going. And when I say where it's going, what I mean is in terms of strengthening. Is it at the process of where it's going to be amplifying over time, or is it going to be weakening over time? So obviously, you want it. If you're looking for something to develop, you're going to want to see the upper air trough amplifying. So you want to see that trough getting sharper. The situation for this weekend, that upper trough is not getting sharper. It's actually getting broader, and I can illustrate that here. I'll bring the window back up, and we'll bring the GFS upper air back up as well. So, and we'll do it on a close-up so you can see. Let me just back it up. So take a look at. Here's a map of the GFS trough. You got this stalled front that's off the East Coast. Okay, so if you're looking at this and saying, well, why is it that low is not going to be coming up? Well, take a look at this flow and look at this, watch the trough, and I'll back it up even more. So this is Friday night. You have a trough that is swinging down from Minnesota southeast into Texas. You still have, in spite of the fact that you've brought this weather system through, because that short wave in that system, that upper low, is now north of New Brunswick and heading toward southeast Labrador, Nova Scotia. So you still have a southwest flow here, and you could look at this and say, well, how come we're not going to have anything happen? Well, for one thing, this first system is just eating everything with regards to moisture. So there's going to be very little left for this to work on. But when we move forward with this trough that's coming in, if this were getting deeper and sharper, where we would see an increase in inflow, more of a southerly flow along the East Coast, that would pump in some moisture. Instead, if you watch this trough over the course of the weekend, instead of getting sharper, it gets broader. And suddenly, when we get to Sunday, your flow is actually westerly. Okay? So you can't really do anything with that, because if any wave that forms out here in a situation like this is going to go that way, to the northeast and out, it can't climb because of the fact that you're getting this trough that's basically the upper low that's coming down and broadening its influence out from the plains to Cape Cod. So you've got an almost straight line flow from central South Dakota out to about Boston. And in that situation, you're not going to be able to bring a wave up. On the other hand, if the trough had sharpened and become more V-shaped, where you wind up with a south-southwest flow, you get a little wave that develops, that's where you could possibly see something climb up, and then you would look at the possibility of some precipitation here. So you got to look at where we are. It's basically, you kind of look at it in terms of where we are and where are we going. And of course, when you look at these storms, when they impact you, in terms of getting the greatest impact, you're going to want to, you're going to be where the pressures are, when the pressures are falling rapidly, that happens over you. If those things are happening where you are, that's where you see the worst of it. And we saw that happen on Sunday with the storm system that pulled up the remnants of Olga in there. So you have to look at where you are and where you're going so that you can determine what your outcome is going to be. And thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it, Izzy. Thank you so much. No firehouse, please, this winter, Mike Talley. Okay, I guess I needed one before that. You got the winter gear on. I got you. And nice to see the regulars all on board, by the way. A big collective hello to everybody tonight. And to any of you who were new, please go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel and have your notifications set, because we do these live streams almost every night. And I think, by the way, I did a live stream Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and I think that worked out pretty well for the most part. One of the problems I have on a weekend is I need a little downtime. So I'm usually, if I start to make plans for later in the day or for Saturday night or for Sunday, it just makes it hard for me to do a live stream, clearly. Plus, after a week of doing them, my brain does get fried, so I need a little bit of a recovery day. But I think that Sunday morning, live stream at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning with a cup of coffee seemed to work pretty well. Scott Briller, how rare was that snowstorm last November 15th? Yeah, November snows in the coastal Northeast. They happen on occasion, but if you go back and count the number of times that we've had an inch of snow in the month of November, it works out to about 1 every 10 years. So last year we had it, and we also had it I think maybe back in 2012 with the post Sandy. And let me paint a broader picture. So let's cover New York City and maybe areas inland by about 15 or 20 miles, and include the coastal areas. So it's about once every 9 or 10 years that you wind up with something, and in November. And by the way, clocks go back an hour Saturday night, which means that the European model, the overnight model, instead of starting at 2 a.m., starts at 1 a.m. Honestly, the sun would come through at some point today. I actually saw some brightening and a couple of slivers of sun. Peter Bicker is on tonight. Peter, you made a very good point when you messaged me on Patreon earlier with regards to these storms tomorrow. I think they're going to peak out when they reach eastern Pennsylvania and into westernmost New Jersey. And then after that, they're going to start to weaken a little bit. But they may surprise you. The marine layer may get dislodged this time around. It doesn't look especially thick. It's only at the very bottom of the atmosphere, and I even noticed today how it didn't take much for the sun to cut through some of the lower clouds. I mean, it was very little, but clearly you could see the sun trying to cut through the low clouds and the fog. So it was telling you that above, say, 1,000 or 1,500 feet, that there wasn't a lot of cloud cover at all. Of course, that now is changed because you've got all this moisture coming up from the south that is at the higher levels of the atmosphere, and we saw that on the water vapor imagery. But don't sell it too short for tomorrow. And that warm sector may get in. And those thunderstorms may hold on a bit longer than you think. Chuck Cardillo, I think the Thanksgiving snowstorm you're referring to was in Thanksgiving of 1989. And I remember that because my oldest daughter was 10 months old, and we wound up having to have like an emergency Thanksgiving dinner at home because we had 8 inches of snow where I was on Long Island, and in fact the next morning it dropped down to 11 above zero, and it was the coldest temperature of the whole winter. It was the biggest snowfall and the coldest temperature of the whole winter happened on that Thanksgiving day, believe it or not. It doesn't necessarily mean that if it snows in November that you could wind up with not a whole lot of snow for the rest of the winter. I just kind of look at what the overall pattern is telling me, and we'll just watch how it evolves. I do think that the weather pattern that we're seeing right now going into November seems to be different from what we had last year. So we'll see where it takes us, where we are a month from now. Because really, as far as where it goes after the short and medium range, I'm not really sure. Hey, Ruthless Goat, I hope it finally stopped snowing by you, because you had enough, and you're still in the teens out your way. Let me see if that map is working. No, it's still not working. I don't know what the problem is with this. This thing will load, and then it unloads, and it there isn't a whole much. The data's not working on it, so for some reason, it kind of died out. All right. John Manelli, Nice to see you. Rosendo Benitez. The new GFS Model 18Z is showing something interesting on the 9th and 10th. Okay. I was hoping to get... I'm going to have to leave in about a minute. Let me look off screen. Okay. I will look off screen. I kind of figured it probably was showing something with that frontal boundary, which may or may not be that there on the next run, but we'll see. You're talking day 9 and 10 here, guy. It's way, way ahead, okay? I would say right now, based on what I'm seeing, let's just call it a no, okay? For now, let's just say no. And then we'll take a look tomorrow and see if it's there. Tell you what, if it's there early next week, then we'll get interested. Can the enhanced risk from David McLean, welcome, by the way. I think you're new. Welcome. Can the enhanced risk from the Storm Prediction Center possibly escalate to Youngstown, Ohio on Thursday? If not, when can Youngstown get severe weather? Well, I will tell you this. You're not likely to see the severe weather risk area pushed back westward. The frontal boundary is already there is the risk of thunderstorms in southeast Ohio, and also the marginal risk touches the Ohio West Virginia line. I mean, unless this thing really were to be much slower, it's hard for me to imagine it pushing it back all the way to the northwest. So the answer to your question is, as far as the enhanced risk is concerned, the answer is no, and I don't see anything in terms of severe weather threats coming after this storm goes by. We are going to be getting a break for a while. Johnny Quest, I'm sorry, I just remembered because you did ask about whether they may watch box it tomorrow for a tornado. I don't know. Hard to say. At least by you. I want to just really quick, give me 1 second here. I just want to take a look at something. Let's go to the NAM 3. And then I really have to go. I just want to look at something here on the... You've got this warm frontal stuff that's coming up, okay? You know what? You might have a pretty interesting squall line that comes through there sometime later tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. And the NAM 3 has got a really impressive looking line of storms that sets up from western New York, going down, cutting across Pennsylvania, and still has a very good-looking squall line tomorrow evening approaching western New Jersey. After that, it starts to weaken a little bit. But you know what? I wouldn't be surprised to see a watch box or two come up tomorrow, given the situation that we have going on for Thursday. All right, folks, I gotta go because I have a live TV hit to do at the top of the hour. So thanks very much for being here. Izzy, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Yes, Scott Briller, thanks for reminding me. November 20th, Wednesday, November 20th at 7 p.m., I will be at the Bayonne Library in Bayonne, New Jersey. So all you New Jersey folks, or even non-New Jersey folks, come on out to the Bayonne Library in Bayonne, New Jersey on Wednesday, November 20th at 7 o'clock. Download the meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app. It's absolutely free. And Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman, also free. And think about subscribing to my subscription platform on Patreon. It's just $2 a month, and it really goes to support all the stuff I'm doing here for that $2, okay? And there are higher tiers available for those of you who need hand-holding during snow events, if weather is a big part of your decision-making on a day-to-day basis. There's some higher tiers available for you, and you can message me anytime on Patreon. The link to it is patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and there's a link on the descriptor of this live stream or the descriptor to this video if you're watching it on a replay. And one last thing, if you would like to support this channel, an easy way and a cost-free way to do it is if you shop on Amazon, to use the Amazon link that I have on here. It's amazon.com/shop/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's also on the descriptor to this live stream or the descriptor to this video. And we are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated site. So if you shop on Amazon via that link, you use the their search bar, you get whatever you want. You don't have to buy what's on there on my page. You can just go ahead and search and shop. Amazon will throw me back a little bit of coin out of their pocket, and that also helps, keeps ads on the app to a minimum, and gets me a couple of cigars and a cup of coffee or a beer every once in a while. All right, so have a great night, folks. We will see you tomorrow, and maybe I'll get Rayo on since we'll have severe weather pending. All right, good night, everybody.